Morning and welcome to Over the Target. I'm Lee Smith. We have a great show this morning asking a lot of important questions, and we've got the man to answer them. One of the questions I want to get to the bottom of is, why does it seem like Health and Human Services is one of the most important agencies right now in Washington, D.C., and is HHS an entry point for foreign influence, in particular the Chinese Communist Party? What is One Health? It's a global initiative that also appears to be dominated by American adversaries. It also appears to be a global surveillance initiative, that has come to the hometown of our guest this morning, the great Brian O'Shea, professional intelligence analyst and host of Mostly Peaceful on dailyclout.io. Brian, thanks so much for being here this morning. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me, and thank you for that very generous introduction.
Well, I mean, there is so much we have to talk about, and there's so much that you've been working on. So let's start slowly. Let's explain first of all, or you explain, what is One Health? Where did it come from? What are they up to? And how did it get to your hometown?
Okay. Well, One Health is defined as a holistic approach which links animal health, human health, and the environment all together. So if you treat one, you need to treat all. And it's been around for about 100 years. It started out as one medicine. Great idea. I think we all agree that if a tick bites you, you should probably find out where the tick lives and which animals are bringing that to your backyard so you can deal with that. I love holistic approaches to anything within reason. Now, since I would say the last decade, even before the pandemic, this One Health concept has morphed into an approach to almost everything. And what I mean by that is One Health is now defined by the WHO as everything I just said, but also bringing equitable results, fighting environmental racism, which has a million definitions, even recommending how governments spend their money. And it is at the core of the pandemic treaty, which is not currently called, but the pandemic treaty at the WHO as almost like the underlying governance that local governments right up to national governments will operate under in the event of the declaration of a global health emergency.
We've spoken about this before here and Over the Target, and it's something definitely of interest to all EPA TV's audience, is that pandemic treaty. So if you can just give a little more detail on how One Health is at the center of this.
Okay, it's a little difficult to concisely define, but I will do my best.
That's all right. We love difficulty, and you're the man to unpack it.
And just, in saying that, I will say that it almost feels like it is intentionally nebulous, so it cannot be defined. But
you mean One Health is?
One Health is. There's a million definitions. I'll go into that in a bit. How it's tied to this pandemic treaty that the WHO is once again pushing is the pandemic treaty essentially gets all the member countries of the WHO, the World Health Organization, to agree to this treaty, which says, okay, the director of the WHO has the ability and the authority to declare the next, as they say, it's always the next, not if, the next global health emergency or the next global pandemic. And so what does that mean? That means the director of the WHO at any time can decide, however they define it at the WHO, that is a global public health emergency, where One Health ties in, just like any emergency, just like if there's a FEMA emergency, just like if the US or the Allies conquer territory, you need rules and governance for that to operate, so people know, okay, the local authorities know they do this, this, and this. This is how they operate under a global health emergency once it's declared. That's what One Health is. One Health
I
is that
see.
framework of governing instructions, the rules and regulations, if you will.
Okay. This is fascinating. This is really fascinating. So, wait. So, One Health. So they set this up. They set up these rules and regulations before the pandemic treaty. So basically, what we're talking about is the pandemic. The pandemic treaty is the. I guess one way to put it would be what the warhead, right? This is they already have the structure, but to make all this work, they need a pandemic to kick in the rules and regulations. Why are these rules and regulations so important? I figured a lot with the idea with the pandemic treaty, because of the vaccine mandates here in the United States. In a sense, it was printing money, right, for pharmaceutical manufacturers, and it would be appealing to make the rest of the world force their citizens, force their people to submit to mandates as well. Why is the pandemic treaty so important?
Well, it depends who you're asking it's important to.
Well, I mean, for WHO and for the different countries that have signed on. I mean, I guess insofar as there's this holistic approach in the center, it makes sense. If you're going all the way from ticks, as you said, all the way up to the EU, that makes sense. But in terms of national sovereignty, how does that make sense?
Well, they don't care about national sovereignty, and I believe that's been made clear through this pandemic. The only time national sovereignty is even mentioned in these WHO discussions is when the director of the WHO, Dr. Tedros, is constantly saying, no, we're not going to subvert national sovereignty. There's nothing like that in the treaty. And he's correct. There is nothing like that in the treaty. However, One Health, coming back to our original topic, it's pre-installed. It's here. CDC set up its first One Health office in 2009. Peter Daszak, the CEO of EcoHealth Alliance, who was the lead investigator to investigate spillover at the beginning of the pandemic. He wrote the architecture with the World Bank Group for One Health.
Well, wait, can we give a little more detail on Daszak too? Because you identify him as the investigator of the spillover, but there are some people who believe that he may be partly responsible for the spillover. So if you can just give a little more detail on Peter Daszak and EcoHealth.
Sure, and I would say that he wants it to be spillover. The debate where this virus came from is currently, did it escape from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, part of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, which is kind of like their HHS, Health and Human Services, or was it a natural spillover? Did a bat bite a cow and then the cow kissed a civet or whatever, And so that's what Peter Daszak and the WHO and the global public health authorities have been pushing. Now, who is Peter Daszak? Peter Daszak runs EcoHealth Alliance. It used to be called, I believe, the Wildlife Trust. It used to be called Conservation Medicine. There's numerous names this thing has morphed through. What he has been pushing for the last decade or more is a way to vaccinate not really people, but to vaccinate animals. There's even a schematic, which I will make sure you get, where and this was turned down by DARPA because he was seeking funding, where bats are bumping into each other in this diagram to spread this bat vaccine to keep humans safe. So he's really a huge champion of the One Health concept, which means we have to prevent spillovers. Now, fast forward, pandemic happens. WHO says we have to investigate. They send Peter Mbarek, Peter Daszak, all these people over there to investigate. Well, pretty quickly, and thank God that they left the internet on and people have brains and can read. People figured out pretty quickly, hey, wait a minute. Peter Daszak, he's the guy that was working at the Wuhan
Yeah.
Institute of Virology and funneling money back and forth between the NIH and the Chinese Academy of Sciences, WIV. Why is he investigating? So he was pulled off, but he continues to push this spillover theory with these peer-reviewed papers that if you look at them closely, it's all the same scientists, a lot of them working for him, pushing it, but they kind of list themselves as these separate scientists. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, this is fascinating because it totally makes sense what you're saying. If he's trying to, right, that was the plan that EcoHealth submitted to DARPA to inoculate bats, right? And that would be a central, it seems like that would be a core tenet of the One Health ethos as you're describing, like, oh, well, the way we're going to protect people from bat coronaviruses is to let's inoculate the bats themselves before they get a chance to go to the people. Let's go after the bats. So is that the basic principle that One Health is founded on? That and this is why Daszak is key to this?
I would say that's a very small part of it. When you really read between the lines on One Health, especially in the 2018 architecture, which EcoHealth Alliance and World Bank Group wrote together, and I got to keep beating that drum, it seems to me like a land grab. Because, because what they're not saying out loud, but indicating in blaming human behavior for spillovers, it sounds to me like they want to create buffer zones. And what really led me to believe this was, first of all, I'd never heard of One Health. I discovered it in 2021, July of 2021, while I was looking into Daszak, like a lot of great citizen detectives were. And I see this One Health. I'm like, what the? And I start reading it. Then it hits me halfway through this 156-page manifesto is that it was written by the very guy who we think caused this and that was instrumental in it.
Right.
And so when I really looked into it, I see things like surveillance, so we can see not only animal behavior, but human behavior, how you're raising your cattle, how you are raising your crops. Are you following the One Health method? If not, there's a whole network set up in the Chinese equivalent test program called China Predict, where they have a snitch network that is laid out in a diagram. So to me, it looks like a land grab because it's telling you how to use your land. There's huge sections on land use, and I haven't connected this dot yet, but around the same time I found this One Health framework, Senator Kennedy here in the United States was arguing against FEMA's sudden motivation to increase flood insurance, which mainly affects poor areas in Southeast United States, by 200%. And by going through FEMA, they don't have to go through Congress. So I saw that, followed by several other reports. You may recall white-tailed deer getting COVID and can wildlife get COVID? I looked into that, and the source of all of that seemed to be the same people in One Health and the same people associated with Peter Daszak and the EcoHealth Alliance. And yeah, I could go into more of that, but it just reminded me of the 80s movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when they didn't want civilians going out to see the UFO landing. So what did the government do? They created this pandemic where all the birds died to scare people away.
Oh, wait, I'd forgotten all about that. That's right. That's exactly what happened. I'd forgotten all about that. Wow. Yeah. Well, we have to cut away very quickly. When we come back, I want to ask you, I want to get to the land grab because that's fascinating. And I got to ask you to unpack that some more. And also, we are going to talk about how One Health has come to your neighborhood, Brian O'Shea, and maybe other people's neighborhoods as well. And they don't know it, and they should find out. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, please make the jump. We're going away for less than a minute. Make the jump and watch us exclusively on Epoch TV. Russian agent Donald Trump is going to go to jail for 300 years.
This seems like a fairly damning allegation. But if we look at it in context, if we consider the Hillary Clinton email scandal,
Joe Biden had demanded $5 million from a Ukrainian energy company. The same company, Burisma, that employed his son Hunter.
If we consider even the Nixon Watergate scandal, what's happened here seems to kind of pale in comparison.
The FBI sent a confidential human source, a spy, against the Trump campaign to ask about Hillary Clinton's emails. There's something happening on the surface. There's something else going on underneath the surface.